Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Eve, Electric Vision Entertainment. We're all about tech, thoughts, and big hair. Yes, I'm holding resistors because I just needed to do something with my hands. So, here on the show, I'm your host, Aleia, resident scientist, roboticist, computer scientist, all of the things. And on our show, we just build things, really, for the most part. We try to, just soak in the love for tech and just experience, a little hand to hand coding, making electronics as the show pertains to. So if you're new here, welcome to our Mix School Twitch channel, my show. Make sure to follow so that you can be here every Saturday because we do this every Saturday. So you don't want to miss anything. Some days we're just building things. Other days maybe tutorials where you learn something that could help you down along the line later. So make sure to follow us there. If you're not new to the show, welcome back. We're going to do some more project building. Last week, what we did was we were going to work on some LEDs. We were going to work on two projects actually last week. One was a Larson scanner, which we did do. It was the scanner we going back and forth with the LEDs. And the other project was a silent game. It was a memory coding game. But unfortunately, because of time, we could only get to one. Otherwise, I would have kept you all here for several hours doing this. I would have just made different variations and whole different things. However, didn't do it. So instead, we're going to do it today. And we're going to add in a little extra because I'm going to show you the schematic for this project. And, rather than just pulling it up, pointing to a few things, I'm going to show you like what it means. And I'm also going to show you the software I use and kind of the extreme basics, how to get started with it. Because when you pull it up, it's going to be a lot of stuff. It's like Photoshop, but for schematics. And if you've ever used Photoshop, you know that when you first jump into it, it looks crazy. There's things all over the place. There's buttons everywhere, tabs. But once you get into it, it starts making more sense. So I'm going to show you that a little bit. And then we're going to get into building the circuit and then the code. So I'm not going to talk too long about what we're going to do today because we probably will go a little overtime, just a bit, because we started a little late today. But I'm going to try to get everything in so we can at least get it up and running today. And I have the code. I said last show I used my own code. This show I'm going to use my own code. Similar to the last show. When I originally did this project, it was 5 years ago maybe. So the code is still a little dated. It's written in a way that I probably wouldn't have written it now. So we're going to go through it, see kind of like, can I make sense of something I myself wrote? Which is another reason you should comment on your code, because you will be like me and go back to it 5 years later and you're like, well, what the heck is going on here? So comment your code. It's like taking notes for yourself. So with that being said, without further ado, I'm just going to jump into showing you the software we're going to use as well as the schematic, and then we'll go from there. So first what I'm going to pull up is the website for it so that you yourself can download it at home. It's a good place to get started. It's where I got started. It's called E.V.E. It is a product for Autodesk. They have a bunch. Autodesk, if you do electronics, if you do 3D printing even, anything like that, you've probably used Autodesk before. They have all sorts of like architecture, product design, a bunch of stuff. AutoCAD, that's usually the big one that people use is AutoCAD. I've used Inventor before. We'll do that another time. I'm in the process of getting a 3D printer. That's going to be some fun stuff. We're going to build like a robot arm that's controlled by your hand. I'm not going to get too much into that because that's probably going to be a few weeks from now. But when we do it, we're going to have to use a 3D printer to print the body. And I use Inventor for that. And it's just the 3D design software. Anyway, back to this one. E.V.E. is for PCB, which is a programmable circuit board. Just like that, circuit boards. So you can use this to design your own, and then you can have it set up to where it'll generate like an actual green board type thing. It's very complex. So we're not going to get into all of that, but you can come here. You can download it for free. So that's what I did. It was super simple. It doesn't take up too much computer space. Don't know how big it is, but it's not too bad. So we'll switch over to the actual eagle. I'm gonna pull up the schematic. It's gonna look crazy. This is where we're at. There's one in and out. So like I said, it gives you like almost like a Photoshop, maybe an older school Photoshop. I think Photoshop looks a little different these days, but this is where it goes. When you pull it up, this is obviously not the landing screen, but you know, the same old tab is up here as usual. And what you would do is just file new, and it'll usually give you options like file new project, or you can have a new schematic, things like that. So when it goes to new, you would just like new schematic, and it'll pull you to this, but of course this side will be blank because you haven't built anything yet. So basically how this works, just a quick, extremely high level overview. Let me zoom out, have some space. Move over here. So this board, right? You have libraries you can add on here, and they contain certain parts. So you can see over here in the sidebar, I have a bunch of parts on here, and they correspond to like all these parts on this board. So the simple way for me to do that is there's a button over here, just add part. It's like a bajillion, I know it's a bajillion things going on. There's an add part button. If you click on that, hopefully that's visible on the screen. Make sure everybody sees that. Okay, cool. I would make the text larger, but I don't think I can for this, to be honest. But we're not going to be here long. We're just going to go through it real quickly. So what you can do is you just come down here and search for the part you need. So say, I know the name of this board, which is a mega, but I'm just going to type Arduino, right? I believe I have Arduino library. Okay, cool. It's under SparkFun boards. It's just the like overarching company. But I'll just go through and say, just click in here, and I will just find the one I'm looking for. So the one I have that I'm currently using, I don't think is in this library. I have to download a different library. But let's just say I'm using this Uno R3 shield, right? Basic one. So say, okay, it'll give it to me, and then I can move it wherever I want. Once I click it, it places it on the board, and just hit escape a couple times to go out of there. Then from there, let's say I need a LED. I could go back to the parts. I'll do this every time, and just type LED, and then you get a bunch of stuff. There's all sorts of preloaded libraries in here. I know more or less which ones I'm not looking for. So just go to the LED one. Inside of there, I'm just scroll down to just basic LED, like that, and I'll do that. And then it shows you all sorts of ridiculous amounts. It's a learning curve. But for me, 3mm LED, which is I'm pretty sure, yeah, we're using a 3mm. But you can see on the side, it gives you, well, on this one, it gives you a picture of what it looks like. It gives you like an overhead top view of what it would be if I switched to the board rather than the schematic. I'll show you that in a minute as well. It's going to look a mess, but I'm going to show it to you. But we're using 3mm, and this is the schematic design for it. So there's lots of places online where you can see the schematics if you want to learn that by yourself. We're probably not going to go through each one piece by piece. We'll just do it as we go along. And then what you can do is go over here to net, and I can say, I usually connect to pin 8. This is like my default first pin I connect, like an input or output to. So I can click on this little circle. I'll hover over it and it'll give me a circle. I click it, and then I can drag it here. Once that circle pops up, I know it's trying to make a connection, so I click it. And then it makes the connection. So, and I can do that for however many LEDs. This is that resistor. So like over here, you know, I have this resistor, I have it set to 220. You can change the values of things. Like over here, I can change this value. I don't know if it's gonna let me. Some of these are pre-built-in values. But usually you can change the value of it. At least wouldn't let me do it for any of these. And then you can also change the name. So like R4. Okay. Oh, let me change the name either. Okay. But usually you can change the different names of their components. So instead of saying like R1 through R4, I could say resistor, LED resistor versus switch resistor type of things, just to help me identify what everything is. So let me go over here and delete this. So let me just delete like this. Just boost over, delete that, and delete this. All right, so, and then with this, like this, what you could do, say I have this and I'm like, this is my entire circuit, start to finish, I don't need anything else. Then you can click on this generate switchboard. Yes. And then this will pop up. And on this screen is the actual board. So when we looked at this example of the parts, when I went to look it up, it'll show this type thing for the LED, this sort of our resistor. Basically what happens is it'll give you this workspace, and this would be your actual board. If you printed it out onto like here, into like this, I wanted to make one of these and have it look professional. I could put these components into this space, and it'll basically, I'll sit here and arrange it however I want to arrange it in this workspace. And then what I could do is, you know, once it's all set up, I can print it out in a certain way. There's all sorts of layers going on here as well. But I can do like a PCB service. And what it'll do is like, here's what these parts usually will cost. Here's a bill of materials of it. Here's the design of this board. And I can just get all that information and email it to like a company and say, hey, print these boards out for me. Sometimes they'll put the pieces on for you. Sometimes they'll just lay out where they go and you have to add the pieces yourself, like solder them on. But it's like, if you wanted to go start from finish, from an idea to like an actual board that you can use, this is how you would do it. We're not going to do that today. It's just an overview real quick. So what this is our board. It's just laid out a little differently than some of the other boards. It just moved a lot of the interactive pins to one side. So it starts so similar to the Larson scanner we built last week, where we have the resistors, the LEDs, and power. Ours is flipped. We actually are powering through the pins and going to ground. So if anything, I would just move this and go down there. And then down here, what's making it different and how we're going to interact with the game is we're going to have these switches. We're going to connect them to some resistors and then connect all of that to ground. Yes, that's how we're going to do this. So that's the basic circuit, and then we'll program it so that all our LEDs are inputs, our outputs, all of our switches are inputs, and then we'll put in some logic to say, you know, if this button's push, light up the LED, and then we'll have a bunch of other stuff. So what we're going to do, I'm going to and pull up my camera so that you can see me build it out. Cool, so this is where we are. So I'm going to build this out, and then once it's built out, we'll switch to the code, and we'll do the fun part. So I tried to lay out some stuff ahead of time, so I wasn't digging through parts for like hours, like I usually do on this show, because that happens a lot. So the slide over here. So I started it off a little bit. Well, I didn't really so much start it off. I kind of left what we had from last week. You know, I tested this light out earlier and it was perfectly fine. And then now it's like, haha, joke's on you, we're not doing it. Oh, there we go. It's still blurry, but it's visible. So we have our LEDs. They're connected to ground. And it's like, can I leave it here? Anyway, they're connected to ground. And then on the other side, there's like some resistors there. I want to figure out our solution. this breadboard, but we have our power and our ground connected to our red and blue lines. So right now, all of the LEDs, the negative side is connected to ground on the blue line. The positive side is just over there with the resistors. So I'm going to do first, for our schematic, I'm only doing 4 buttons because the actual Simon game itself is 4 buttons. And that's just because we can really do whatever. We could do like 6 buttons, we could do 5 buttons. It's just easier for like humans. Since it's a memory game, the less things you have to like remember, the better the game goes. So I'm just gonna do 4 LEDs, 4 buttons. So I got my 4 buttons here. I'm gonna take these 2 off. So I'm not gonna use them. And then take these off. All right. And I'm gonna spread them out because I want the buttons to kind of be aligned with the LEDs. So they're numbered. We'll do like 8 spaces or so between them. Feel free to ask questions if you got any questions for me, or you want to see just like me do something different in terms of like how things are laid out, or recommendations for like lighting solutions. I tested it out before the stream and I was like, oh, this is gonna go perfectly. And then of course that was not the case. Just like that's out the way. All right. So I'm gonna add in our buttons. And I need, so for this, we're gonna need some resistors as well for the buttons. It prevents a little bouncing. So we're gonna use some 10K resistors. That's usually the default when you're working with switches, it's 10K. LEDs are always like 220. So we'll throw these in. I'll put 4 buttons. We'll throw that one to this LED. Making sure that they're not aligned in the same row as my resistors or my LEDs. They're close just for spacing purposes, but they're not like on the same horizontal row. Otherwise, they'll pick up on like the same channels and we will have a big issue. In there. And this is how I said, if we could, we could make like a piano. I could probably set up a piano if I took some, or even not a piano, but like, you know, cool little light show where I'm just sitting here and I'm like pushing buttons and the LEDs turn on accordingly to that and just make a whole like weird light show thing. But if you do it at a different time, let me know in the chat, or if you join our Discord, then you can like reach out to me on there and let me know if you want to see something like that where we're like building like a light board or something. All right, so now I have those connected. We're gonna need some other connectors as well. So I'm gonna put green. I'm gonna put green for the LEDs. So I'm just putting it on the other side of the resistors. So this way I can talk to the LEDs. So it'll go from this, it'll go from the jumper through the resistor to the LED out through ground. And I'll connect these jumpers to the Arduino board when we get to that point. Then for the buttons, I'm going to use some small jumpers. And I'm going to have one side connect to the pin, whichever pin I assign it to, and the other side is going to go to ground. Yes, I'm going to do it that way. So, well, it's going to go through the resistor, and then it's going to go through. Yes. And be kind of tight. I'm going to scoot these boys. So one side, I'm going to use these gray guys. All right, so I got that first little right here. There's a pin, and it's connecting from one side of this button to the other side of the screen. Then we get a 10 connector. And set this resistor to go up straight to ground. Actually, do I need this pen? No. I'm actually gonna take this off because I don't need this. We're going to connect resistor. One side is going to go from the resistor, ground, in, go in. Alright. Between these, I'm going to put a connector for our communications. And then I'm going to have a whole nother jumper that's going to connect us to power on the other side. I need 3 colors, not 2 colors. But it's fine. It happens. You know, just gotta roll with it. So that there, the other side to power. So that should be it for each button. So we got our connector from power to the switch, goes through. We have a communications pin to go to our inputs. And then we have a resistor that is going to ground. Even though it doesn't seem to want to stick in there today. Make sure you let's see if I can jam it in there. Resistors are so like frustrating because the upside is they're very malleable, so they bend easy. The downside is they're very malleable, so they bend easy. And so it is complex. But that's our first setup. So I'm just gonna do it 3 more times. Real quick, it's gonna be the exact same way. We have the 10K going to ground. So use these. We got 10K going to ground. Gotta like force it. All right. And that's gonna go to one side of our button. And then we have this on the other side. And then lastly, we have a connector to power. Hopefully this works because part of me thinks some of this is backwards, just looking at how I coded it earlier in the schematic. I'm like, I'm gonna make sure because otherwise the ground and power switched. But we're gonna find out the hard way or the easy way. Hopefully the easy way. We're just gonna see what. All right, throw these other guys in here. It's the fun part of electronics is sometimes you're just kind of like, well, we're just gonna roll with it, and either it's gonna work or it's not gonna work. So it's fun. This is cool. What are those tweezers go? And then get that connected. Put this guy on there, and lastly, we get our power. Right. Cool. And then on our last one, they still that exact same thing. And then we're going to make sure that we have all of our pins connected to the right places, our signals, so that we're able to talk to everything properly. In just a moment. Electronics, half of the hard part of electronics is just like fitting everything in place, as well as, you know, in my opinion, small hands are like the best thing to have when you work in this field, because so many times when just like everything is smushed together and it's just kind of is what it is. There's not really much you can do about that. But you gotta make it work. So some tweezers come in handy. But for me, luckily, I have tiny hands. Everyone's always like, "Oh, you have such little hands," and I was like, "Yes." You'd be surprised how useful that is when you work in electronics. It is like the best thing ever. Okay, and that would be power. Cool. Like I said, feel free to ask questions. Make sure. Let me know if you've worked on any cool projects like this before. We're probably gonna do a lot of other. Well, I said there'll be some days where we're like just building projects. There'll be some days where we're more like tutorial based. We're like, okay, let's go in depth. Like I said, we'll do. They might be next week. Might really just be next week where we're doing the like soldering show on how to do that. So it's more like a tutorial type thing. This one today is more of like, hey, we're gonna build this project, try to get it working. What happens? So that should be the whole setup like that. It's a little difficult to see because of the lighting and everything, but that's the setup that we got going on. All right. Next part, or the last part for our setup, is making sure that we have the pins in the right place. So I am going to see if I labeled them on my schematic. Sometimes I use, sometimes I don't. All right, so if I'm not mistaken, I have the first LED connected to pin 2, 2 through 5, and then my buttons are 11 through 14. Pretty sure. Something like that. It's not 2 through 5. We're gonna pull up the code. I'm gonna pull the code up and check because the program's on there. So while we do that, we'll go over the code a little bit while we're there too. So in the first 2 lines of this, you can already see where we're starting. Count, we'll talk about count later. LED sequence, I'm probably going to lower this number extremely. Well, it won't really matter for our purposes. We're not playing the whole game through. But this 32 was because I wanted it to remember up to 32 sequences. And in hindsight, I don't know what I was thinking because I mean, there's 32 levels to this game. I don't know I'm sure someone has graphic memory, but remembering 32 sequences of this is not, you know, people break down like a 10-digit phone number into like 334, so it's easy to remember. So the idea that people are going to remember 32 numbers, we're looking here, my LED pins. I did it like I did last time, where I put in a for loop to assign everything. So I have a list of pins. So pins are 2 through 5. The switches are 7 through 8. So I guess I really did do 2 through 5, 7 through 8. It's just labeled slightly differently on my schematic because of the type of board that I use. So I'm going to real quick hook that up for you guys. Let's see if I can pull it up over here. To here, here. So we're here. They said the white corners are our buttons and the green ones are LEDs, so a little easier to remember. So I'm just gonna go to our board, of course, and 2 through 5. So I'm gonna start over here for our buttons. And 2 through 5. So 2, 3. That's not 2. 2, 3. So I can try to make sure you can see it a little bit. I know it's like super hard to spell stuff. Yeah, 2 through 5 on there. And then the whites for our buttons was 7 through 9. If I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check myself. 7 through 10. Yeah. 7. I don't know, I never used 6. Actually, let me unplug this because something's programmed on it. I don't know it. It's like something's not right here. Boom. And alright, so everything should be hooked up. Let me actually just unplug certain things. We'll put power and ground in here. So that ground, and we have put 5-volt power. Alright. So we see that it's still shuffling through. So the last thing we put that was coded on here was our Larson scanner. So that's why you see it doing the Larson scanny stuff from last session. It's still programmed. So I'm pretty sure I used the same pins. And since the schematic was basic, the LED part of the schematic is the same as the Larson scanner, it still works. The only difference is we are going to integrate the buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the code. I'm going to upload it to make sure it works. Then we'll talk about it. If it doesn't work, I already pretty sure I know why it doesn't work. As soon as I can find my, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and upload this. Hopefully everything is fine. And cool. Oh no, it doesn't want to read it. There we go. All right. So let's upload this to the board. Cool. So I'm gonna switch back. No, no one's doing so much switching between different cameras and stuff on this stuff. So you see nothing happening. That's because it's currently running and it started, but I haven't done anything. So there's a reset button on this Arduino. This is a red button over here in the corner. If you hit it, it restarts the program. So I'm gonna do it and you'll see what's going to happen. All right, so this far one came on. So in theory, this works. When I push this button as the correct answer, and it should flash once. It'll flash that button once to see that I turned it on. It'll flash all of the pins to say you passed the level, and then it'll do the next sequence. So let's see. Came on, all flash, 1, 2, cool. So then it would be, I click this one, and I think it was this one. No, it was not that one. I need to put a delay time between when it starts because it just started over somewhere. I was looking at the screen and I did everything backwards. So I'm going to start it. So basically what's supposed to happen is, like I said, it flashes, goes on. Sorry, I'm really not paying attention, looking at the screen. So then push that, boom. And then, let's see if this works. Correct. And then, cool. This is the Simon game, basically, is to test your memory. And this is why I said, why did I put this to 32? Because I'm not going to remember 32 of these. Maybe someone will. I challenge you to build one of these and then show me that you passed 32 levels. Because that's wild to me. Maybe we'll do some sort of cool contest like that in the future. Make something, some memory game and watch you beat it. But let's say that I do it wrong. I don't know which one it was. Yeah, so it goes down the row to be like, and then it immediately jumps to the next one, which there probably should be a longer delay so that, you know, if it fails, it goes through. That 5th button push was the start of the next game. But it's hard to tell that all the time. So maybe we'll edit that. So let's go to the code to explain how this is working. Hoping so. So we start up here. We're putting some global variables. We have our setup function. So you gotta have it every time. If you don't have the setup function, it's just not gonna work. So for instance, let's comment everything out here. If I try to verify it, it's not gonna work because there is no setup function. Oh. Arduino. Where do you like this? There's a shortcut just for like all you pro coders out there. I guess if you're a pro coder, you probably already know this. But if you like select something or click into a line and you hit Control question mark or Command question mark, then it comments it out. Usually, if you re-highlight it and hit it again, it uncomments it. Apparently, Arduino does not do that. Maybe I'll send them like a bug report and say, hey, you should do this. It'll be useful. So yeah, so we're going from 1 through 4, or 0 to 3, because we have 4 items in our array: 0, 1, 2, 3, referring to the indexes or the amount of things that they're holding. I'm going to say for everyone in here, I could technically do 1 through 5, so it will be 1, 2, 3, 4. But anyway, doesn't matter in this case. We can do 7 through 12. So we're saying for all of them, set first pin is output, and then we'll set the switch as input. So it's going to go through each. So it's going to say pin 2 output, pin 7 input, pin 3 output, pin 8 input, and just keep doing it through all of that. So setup serial.begin 96, 9600. We're not really going to use it. I'm not sure I put it in here, but that was basically for when I showed last time the serial monitor and how you can read data from it. That's what that is. And I believe the only reason is because there's this thing that happens with switches. I don't know if I can show it here. Is it running? It should be running. Let's see if I can pull up the monitor, if it'll even matter, honestly. No, because it's not reading from it. Okay, doesn't matter. Basically, there's this thing with switches, and it's why you usually have to add in some extra extra logic. It's this thing called bouncing, and it's when you click a switch, because of how they're built internally. You click it, usually it should just be like on, off, or whatever. Like it immediately should switch from one to or the other. However, it's not always the case. There'll be times where it bounces just a little, and you won't notice it because it's such a small thing. But if it bounces in there just enough, it may pick up a false signal. So you might click it once and it's like, yes, it made contact, but then like a fraction of a second later, even though it seems like the buttons come back up, it just barely made contact. And in those instances, it can throw off a lot of things. So it might double read a signal, it might not read a signal. It'll just freak out for a second. And it's really small, but it, for something like this type of circuit, it may not matter as much, but there might be other more finely tuned type of things like obstacle avoidance or alarm systems or whatever, where bouncing actually could make a difference. So usually you put in like a specific type of logic to handle something like that. So we have our counts to keep track of certain things. We're going to find out as we go. I went through this the other day. It was like 2 weeks ago. So I don't remember. And then random seed. This is for generating random outputs or inputs, random values. And that's for, when I clicked that button, each time it gave me a different starting point. I could pick, the third LED or the second LED or whichever. And so I'm not telling it each time what to do. It's figuring out, quote unquote, figuring out for itself which one it wants to start with, which one is going to pick next, etc. So that's why we set that up here. So then we made our own function. There's a couple of functions I made myself. So I have this is pressed function, which returns true or false. And that's why I set Boolean, because I need to actually return something. Whereas, say, for instance, these void functions, they do stuff, but I don't need anything from them. They're just like, are there. Whereas these, it's like at the end of it, whatever happens in here, I'm going to use it somewhere else. So I need to say, like at this bottom, return pressed. It's going to spit out something that I can use later. And so I'll not only set up a return, but I have to identify what that thing being returned is. So in this case, Boolean. A Boolean just says true or false. Is it on, is it off? So it's pressed, and it takes in a switch number. So I have later down, switch numbers that can go in, you know, like switch 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. So it starts off false, and it says if it's high. So if the switch clicked for that, basically for that switch. So say number 3 was here. So pin number 3 in that sequence of pins at the very top, if it's high, so if it was pressed, wait a little bit, just enough for like not bouncing, which is why this delay 10 is basically like the easiest way to not deal with bouncing is wait like 10 milliseconds. Because usually the bounce will happen like less than that. So it's like wait 10 milliseconds and then do something. Just to make sure we're actually hearing a real signal. And then as long as it's on, then say press was true. So if you pushed it, then say it's pushed, basically, and then say whether it was true or false. Will the push or return that? I'm not sure. I don't sure might not need this part. Now that I'm looking at it in hindsight, we'll clean code at a different time. As I said, this is old code, and now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, we should have this stuff in here. So, but that's the beauty of like going back and reading your own code. You're like, how high have evolved? Because this is a mess, but it works, and that's the only reason I've really changed it. You know, future shows maybe for doing something more advanced. I won't just use my old code. If I do, I'll like go through and like make some edits and clean it up a little bit. But for now, like whatever. We just want to make sure it works for our purposes. So we have button pressed, which is another function. This one's going to return a number. So int means integer, which is a whole number. And you can see that down here, returning button number. So it's basically going through and seeing which button number it is. It's interesting. There's all sorts of weird variables going on here. Button number, switch number. They technically should be the same. So buttons are the switches. So it sets it off as -1, and then it goes from 0 to 4. And if it's true, then just set button number to whatever that number is, and then return that number at the end. Interesting. It's a lot of interesting code happening in here. So then this is how you pass the level. It's just wait. This is our, you know, once I had clicked the button, like the LED came on, I clicked the button in response to that same LED. Wait 500 milliseconds, turn them all on, wait 500, turn it all off, and then wait another 500. So that was just that like, or all of them at the end. Just something I came up with to indicate that you passed the level. It could have been anything. It could have been flash twice. I could just like copy and paste this whole thing again and say, you passed the level, flash twice. Actually, I'm gonna do that because why not? I'm gonna do that real quick. We're just gonna iterate, so why not? And show what happens. I'm gonna save this. We'll upload it. Usually I would do this a lot cleaner, but we're just gonna roll with it today. I would do this as a for loop now. Actually, I'm gonna do that. So since it's kind of similar to this, I'm gonna copy and paste it down here. And this one we're gonna say 0, 1. So while it's less than 2, so it's gonna do first time, the second time. Oops, no. We're gonna do 4 because we have 4 of these. We get this whole chunk. No. So we're gonna say that, and instead of setting it to inputs, we are going to say turn high. And low. I'm gonna put in this delay. Okay, so this is gonna go play with this just a little bit, go through the code, and then this is where all the big stuff happens. So we'll get to that, and then we're just gonna test this out real quick, see what happens, and we'll go from there. not going to keep you all too long because we technically have it working, but I want to make sure we go through all the code so you can see exactly what's happening, and if this even works. Because I'm just rolling with this off the top of my head. It should work. We're going to go through once, turn one on, wait, turn one on, just 4 times. Let's just do it and see if it's going to work. Alright, so push this button. I think it's not going to work the way I want it to. I'm pretty sure I know why. Yeah, so what's happening is it's only looking at this first pin, then waiting, second pin. The reason it's doing it this way is because I'm not changing this I value anywhere for one. So I'm just leaving it really at 0 for both. Turns it on, turns it back off, and then that's it. In order for this to work, I'd have to copy this like whole chunk inside of here. I'm so off track now, but like part of me, this is the beauty and the hate of coding. Is like once you're like, oh, I think that could work, then you kind of get stuck in it for a while. But we're going to see if this works. So it turns them all on. We'll be here all day. Look at me trying to do this. No, it was right the first time. Yeah, I just need to iterate it to do that, and then I'll do that. Freaking colons. It just told me it was wrong because of my colon. Yeah, so let's let me throw another delay in there. So it's like this is, yeah. It's still probably not going to do it the way I think it's supposed to do it. It's just going to do one at a time. But let's see, you know, verify that that works. No, similar. I've been coding in Python for so long that it's like semicolons. Who cares? It's the downside of learning multiple languages is trying to remember the syntax wrong with them. It's not like this. Flash is on, and then it 1, 2. Yeah, it just skips through it. So we're not going to go too much into that. I'll be here trying to figure out this code forever. Maybe next time I'll pull up something more iterative. But there is a way I can do this to make it work, just because of all this repetition. We're just going to set it up the basic way and do 2 flashes. The non-dry way, which means dry is do not repeat. Don't repeat yourself, which is exactly what I'm doing here. Where I'm just like saying the same thing over and over. Technically it works, but it's just not very up to standard. It's not very clean code. There's always like a more modular way to do things. So do that, do it, and then cool, flashes twice. So it works. It's just not pretty. But right now it works. So let's go through the other code real quick. So win game, similar. It's going to go in row down. So instead of turning them all on at once and then all off at the same time, it's going to go one at a time and turn them high and low. So, oh no, that's the win. The lose is that one. We're just going to go through one, turn it on, turn it off, and then it's going to go through, iterate through the pins. So it's going to go like, kind of like the Larson scanner, where it's just like one at a time goes through. So there's that. And then this is really the important part. It's very confusing. But I'm going to try to explain a bit of what's happening. So first, we're starting off just saying lose is false. Doesn't really matter in this case, but it's like you haven't lost yet. So it's good. You start off winning. And then we have this that generates a random sequence. So from 0 to 32, or 0 to 31, since there's 32 levels, but of course arrays and computers count 0 as a first, so positive. So we're going to go 32 times through, generate a random number between 0 through 4. And that's what this 4 is here. So it starts at 0, generate 1 to 0. So it's going to pick a random number between these pins and put that in the sequence. So the first time through, it'll be like 0. Second time, it goes through like 0 and 1, and then 0, 1, 4. So that's what this is doing. It's just generating a sequence. There's a lot in here. This is to, so we're going to whatever's in our sequence, we are going to get that corresponding number, starting at 0 to the level. So like we're level 1, there should only be 1 pin coming on. Level 2, there should be 2 pins going on. It's just going to iterate up. So the higher the level, then the higher the sequence, which is why it's hard at 32. So there's 32 sequences. So when you do that, you're first going to turn whichever numbers in that sequence. So you say we're at sequence 4, we're looking there for a full level sequence, turn that on, and then turn it off. So that's how we know exactly which one's coming on initially. Count 0, lose is still false. Well, your count's less than your level, so the count will probably go up each time. But that's the amount that I'm pushing myself as a user. The button's not pressed. Then we look and see from that other function you wrote above, did I push anything? And that's when is it true or is it false? It'll get set to this button. If it's bigger than -1, then we're going to go through the sequence and do some more logic. We're going to like add it to our, if the button is the same as the one we push, basically. So whichever button we push is the same, whichever one is stored in the sequence, increase the count, turn that button on, turn it off. So that's when I go and push the button myself and it flashes once. Otherwise, if I push, this is false. If the button I push is not equal to the one in the sequence, then I lost the game automatically. And then it says break. So all this other stuff down here is just going to jump out. It's like, it doesn't matter. You lost. We're done here. And then it'll go back to the top way up here and do it again. It's just going to let you keep playing the game. But if not, if you go through and like, yeah, it's true, it'll turn that button on, then it'll come down here instead. And what does it go through here? It'll just keep going through. But if lose is true, then do this sequence. So lose game, which is the one we coded earlier, which is like the Larson scanner drops down. You lost that visual sequence. If you lost the game and your level's less than 32, or if you didn't lose the game and your level's less than 32, then it'll show the sequence to pass the level. So it'll flash once. So say like, I pushed the right button the first time, it'll be like, yay, pass the level. Do it again, you pass, do like that. And then this regular else is like, no special cases, no nothing. So basically, you haven't lost the game and your level is greater than 32 or at 32, which means you got to the end. Then you'll play the sequence for winning the game. I've coded it. I've never gotten to this. I think I had to like cheat the system once just to know that it worked. And then it'll go back to the top and start over. And so the real like crucial part of it is like right in here, where it's like taking account of putting things into the sequences each time, generating random sequences, keeping track of not only what sequences in terms of the computer's memory for the game, but in terms of also what buttons have I pushed so far. And it compares all of that against each other every single time. And all this crazy mess that's over here. Some of this I'm like, I definitely don't need. Like, why am I using -1 instead of 0 and 1? And count or lose equals false, it's like twice in here, and it doesn't need to be. There's a couple things. Some of it is a little more like straightforward, some of it's not. But I'm gonna just pull it up again so you can kind of visually see again what's going on. And we'll probably wrap it up today. I'm gonna start the game over again. Cool. So like I said, if I push the correct one, it lights up and then it shows pass level. Then it generates another sequence. It remembers the first one. It adds into that same list of sequences the second one. And then when I start, it's done. Now it's waiting for me. It's like, what are you going to put in? So I'm going to say my input is this and this. It adds it to my sequence. It compares its sequence to mine. If they match, that's when I get that double flash. I think it's this. Yeah. So then let's say I'm doing it. I'm like, oh no, I forgot. Then I want to get that loose sequence. 1, 2, 3. Let's say this one. So it's incorrect. So it slides it down to show that you lost. And then it starts over. So there probably needs to be a delay at the end to be like, hey, before we do anything else, like, wait a second. So I know that it's this. Because if you turned away for half a second, you would have missed it, and then you would have lost immediately versus starting over and playing again. So there's not any questions in our chat. Let me switch back to pull the schematic back up just so we can look at it while I close this out. So this is basically what we built today. I said this board isn't the exact layout of the board I would usually use. This is the old version of when I made this. Like I said, this was like 5 years ago. It's a different version of E.V.E, so things look a little bit differently in terms of how this board's laid out. It's probably my Android board because it's a Mega 8P, and I'm using a Mega 328P. It's my chip, I'm pretty sure. There's no questions. What I'm gonna do, first off, thanks for joining me on this ride. I know today was like a little heavier, mostly in terms of the code, because it was a little more mathematically driven and just like all over the place. There's a lot of for loops and nested for loops and if statements and just craziness. If I was using VS Code, which is my usual like place where I code, it would be a little easier to read because I have like a theme, the color code stuff. So it makes it pretty. Arduino doesn't have that yet. I don't know. Maybe it does. And I'm probably, I'm sure maybe VS Code has like an integration for Arduino. I haven't looked into it. Maybe I will. Someone let me know if there's like a cool different IDE for Arduino or VS Code or whatever to do it through there. But that is our simple Simon game. I think it's relatively simple. If I had like circuit board to print out, I could make like actual emulation, or I could even add like I could add some buzzers onto here, add another level of that, and say when I push the button, if it fails, give me a certain sound sequence versus visual notifications. Yeah, so that being said, that wraps up this project. Let me know other projects you want me to work on. Next week, there's a high likelihood we're going to do some soldering. I'm not going to promise it because I might end up starting doing the soldering and then like look at it like, you know what, we need to do one other thing first. But most likely we're going to do soldering, and that's going to be really fun because it's a highly valued skill, knowing how to solder. If you know how to solder, like if you're looking to get into like professional electronics, saying that you know how to solder is like a big thing. There's like certifications where you have to take courses on how to do it. So if you go into like one of those courses to get certified, then you're already set up. I got you. So we're gonna do that next week. Alongside that, like I said before, I'm still looking into the exact way I'm going to go about presenting this to you. Because I know there are people out there who are interested in either building it themselves at home or following along in some sort of way. So I think I have a couple ways in which I could possibly we could do that. Just a better way to share the information as well as for you to follow along at home. So hopefully we get that all ready and set up. Now that we're on spring break at mixed school. Before we have this like point where classes are over. Then we have spring break, and we have our intensive, which is like our week-long hackathon. So it's like during the spring break, I know you're supposed to just like rest up, but I'm a rest, but I'm also like, let me catch up on a few like housekeeping, a couple of places. So there's that. Just a few reminders about the show. Like I said, we're doing this every Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Let your friends know, let your fellow techies know. Join us on Discord at make.sc/join Discord. You can follow me on Instagram. I changed my tag because I'm rebranding. Sometimes you gotta evolve into a whole new person. On the yeah, I can explain some of the rebranding, if you're wondering. So if you've seen me on the internet, you've probably noticed it happening a little. I've been like throwing it out for the world to see. But yeah, if Jordan wants to pop on, we can definitely talk about that for a few minutes. We got some time, but yeah, we're doing some different things these days. We're evolving as everyone should.
My audio
So,
coming through now? Okay, I know you could hear me already, Aaliyah, but I think my audio should be coming through on Twitch.
yes, they can hear you on Twitch.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let me switch. Do you while you still have your screen share up, do you want to bring up your new branding or anything like that? Do you have some visuals for us?
So I haven't gotten all of my visuals ready for everybody. We're working on that. I'm in the process of making a logo. Um, I'm just trying to decide if I'm gonna hand draw it because I have like this drawing tablet, but I can't find a pen. The pen only works for one. Like only one pen works with this one device, and it's gonna take a month to get here. So I was like, maybe
I
I'll
get
just
that.
yeah. So I was like, maybe I'll just do it pure digitally. It won't come out 100% what I want, but I can make it happen. Um, so I'm gonna pull this up for you guys so you can see this. If you want to follow me on there. So that is
Awesome.
my new tag. So if you follow me on Instagram previously or like my Facebook page or I think mainly those two. Because I don't think I can change my GitHub tag. Um and it's fine like it is. But previously it was Robot Gal. And that was cool. I like it. It has a little like girliness, has a bit of roboticness. But I've grown. I was like, I kinda like the name Electric Empress. So now that I discovered that I can change it, it's like that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna be Electric Empress. So I'm working on some logos, some visual cards for the show, some other stuff that we're gonna get out there to everybody pretty soon. It'll be fun. Um,
Nice. Yeah, and I just wanted to hop on and talk with you a little bit more about it because I know you seemed so uncertain at first that like you could do it or it was like bad to like change your branding. And so I want to see like have you thought about it more? We chatted a little bit, and are you still worried about the
um,
process, or do you think that when you have a clear vision for an improved brand, like should you just go for it?
I kind of just decided like I might as well just go for it, and I was like, the worst that'll happen. Really, I couldn't really think of the actual worst that could happen. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, yeah, there's a certain level of association. Certain people do know me as that, but I think not so many that it would make like a big difference in that sense. And the only concern I had was there's another company like overseas, this electric company called Impress Electric. So I was like, I think if I looked on Instagram at the tags, I didn't want this with like the spaces, but just electric underscore Impress was taken. I'm pretty sure by them or by somebody else. I don't remember. Um,
Well,
but
you
it
know
just
what?
felt like
Everyone's
time.
taken my name too, Elias. I
Yeah,
hate I
well,
hate having to put an underscore in things, but
yep,
I have two underscores in my name as well
yeah.
on some platforms.
It was the only
But
way.
I wanted to get back to the idea that the names are on the surface level they're very different, but I connected so much more with Electric Empress, and I'm curious if you have thought about those connections and like does it feel like this one fits you better or like gives you a more clear vision for how you want to present your work, or what was it that inspired you to think that this one was better?
Um, so the original name Robot Gal, it was given to me by a friend. It was just like a nickname my friends because they used to call me Robot. Because I was just so into tech and I was like a little more stoic back then. So it was Robot, and they nicknamed me that, and it just kind of stuck. But that was 5 years ago, maybe. And over time, I'm kind of like, I like it, but something's just not clicking the same way. Maybe it was because it wasn't a name I gave myself; it was a name someone else gave me.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time has gone, you know, I think originally I came up with it because my Wi-Fi, my hotspot is named Electric Empress. And it's just because I was trying to come up with something that was like, it represents me, but also what I do and who I am. So I was like electric because like electronics. But then Empress because it's just like kind of regal. It's very like feminine, but it's very strong. And I think that kind of the more I thought about it, I was like, that really is kind of what I'm trying to get across. Like I said on here, you know, it's tech thoughts and thick hair. And I was like, what other way to summarize that than Electric Empress? And if you look through, you know, like my Instagram, it's just like stories and um, parts and videos and just like really trying to like center around those three things and just like that idea of like I'm doing electronics, but I'm also this like woman, this black woman who's doing these things as well. And the more I thought about that, I was like, that's what I'm trying to get across. I feel like this name suits me a lot better anyway. And it just sounds cool. So I was like, you
It's
know
like
what?
a
Try it.
rebranding coming of age, where the first
Yes.
one was great and appropriate for where you were. But one of the things I also hear is like robot is very specific and almost would limit you to robots, whereas electric now you're expanding your horizons and you're also declaring that you're not maybe like even if robots are still your favorite, right? It's sort of clarifying that like you're still more than just that, and that you know even just for how long I've known you, Aaliyah, I assume that you're always going to be interested in the hot, fresh, new in the world of electronics. So I just think this name, yeah, it feels like the evolution to match where you are now and your expanded horizons. And I think you said like the word empowerment, which shares a few
Yeah.
letters with Empress. I'm probably related race. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really love this for you, and I think it's also a really obvious difference between gal and empress, right? It's a much more a powerful perspective.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it has been an evolution. It's even, you know, I know maybe we were talking the other day about imposter syndrome, and I don't think it's like super bad all the time. Occasionally, it might hit me, and I won't really notice it has happened. But you know, thinking back to where I was when I had that name, it was like, yeah, I felt like I knew tech, but I wasn't really there. Like, wasn't really a part of it. I still kind of felt on the outside. And even if you look through my page and you look back at the beginning of where it started and the things I was doing, it was like, yeah, occasionally I'll like throw a thing or two on there like, every now and again or be very vague or whatever. And now it's evolved to like, here's this full project that I made, or here's a video about the schematic that we did, or um, more like in depth conversations with people of things related to really STEM as a whole, you
And
know.
you've been writing articles as well, haven't you? I feel like
Yeah, I
I've
just did one
seen them.
yesterday.
Hmm.
Literally, it was about binary trees.
Have you ever heard one of the Make School professors, Browse, talk about superhero identities as a tactic?
I don't think I have,
So
but that's what.
I'll give the super brief version, which is that I believe he made the claim that more people should give themselves superhero identities. I'm sure you remember Captain Rainbow, another one of our former professors. But the argument is that if you give yourself a superhero identity or multiple superhero identities, they actually help you to focus and to achieve the things that are in alignment with the superhero ideals that you have created for yourself. So I just feel like I'm hearing a little bit of that from you now, where you're feeling this sort of alignment with this identity that helps sort of keep you motivated and generating great content for the community.
Yeah, I definitely. I think there's a lot of that where it's just like, you know, I. Yeah, it's almost like that where it's like the Clark Kent, where like even sitting here now, I'm in my lab coat. I'm definitely a different person when I put my lab coat on than when it's not. I've kind of almost turned into like a Rick Sanchez sometimes because I definitely will walk around town in my lab coat and just be like, yeah, I'm a scientist, is what it is. And it's a whole different person. But at the same time, it's like I'm still myself. I just kind of put on a different hat, per se, or like I kind of switched the role from predominantly thinking of one thing and presenting it as one to a different perspective of things, you know.
Would
So
you say, Aaliyah, that you are?
that
You know what I'm about to say.
you, I can feel it coming.
All right. Well, then I'm not gonna say it.
All right.
So what was I gonna say? Actually, if you feel comfortable sharing this little experiment that I've been trying on you and some of the other students, I'm
It's
curious. Like I
it's
know
been working
is it
on
awesome because I know it gets the
class.
eye rolls, but yeah,
It works.
it works. Okay. And so
It
what
actually
is it that we're
works.
talking about for those who
All
have no
right.
idea?
So the phrase that we say now is "I am a STEM professional." And the reason being is because, at least for me, what I think what started it was, just been a bit more active in this community with Make School, with other communities, and trying to reach out further out and like speak at different events and present and things like that. And I was like, wow, I'm getting people asking to come on and talk about data science, talk about robotics, and it was like blowing my mind that it was a thing. And Jordan reminded me, I work at Intel. I'm doing robotics here on the show. I'm in school for data science. Like I actually am a STEM professional, not just like a person just living out in the world. And I will say it's a little cringy, but it does work because ever since I've kind of just been like swaggering around, like, yes, right, I know stuff. And
Nice, nice. I'm picturing you strutting down the halls, um, in your lab coat, holding your
yeah,
laptop. You
I
maybe
get a lot
doing
of
some.
interesting looks.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, they're not weird, but I think people have kind of noticed it a little more because I definitely will go and I'll like feel a little straighter and like I'll have my laptop and my backpack and I'm just like strutting down. I was like, you can't tell me anything because I know things like. That whole idea of imposter syndrome, where it's like you kind of feel like you don't belong. But now, I mean, I didn't really have it as much before, but even now, it's like, you know what? I really do belong here. And I probably am just about the same level, if not more, as you guys as well. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just do
Yeah,
this.
yeah. How many of them are on the internet streaming and sharing information out to inspire others? Hmm?
Exactly.
How
And I've
many of them
spoken
are there?
to a few there. I don't know any, but I've spoken to even like an engineer I worked with, and I was telling her about some of the outreach I do for the school, for myself, for speaking at these events. And she's like, she's glad that she took the time out because we've known each other for a while. We just never had like deep conversation. She's like, she's glad she took the time out to talk to me because it reminded her that like, you know, so often you can get caught in the circle of just like wake up, go to work, go home, relax, watch TV, do it again, and you just get caught in that cycle. And it's like
Hmm.
it made her remember there's other stuff to do. And like she's like, yeah, I really want to do that now. I want to like speak to them and inspire people and like give back to the community in some way. And so it's very interesting doing stuff like that because I don't
And
think a
I
lot
know
of people do
we
that.
talked we had the show earlier where you and Yusuf and Brian talked about getting into streaming. I'm curious because I think it was unrelated to Make School that you started giving talks separately, right, on data science and things like that. Is that true?
Um, Kinda. I haven't quite gotten to the point where I was getting invited out for talks. I more so reached out to people and talked to them, but I didn't like put it out there.
That's still a thing. That was actually
It's still a
leading
thing.
into my question, which was how did you get into that? And it sounds like I'm about to hear another example of Aaliyah just woke up in the morning, realized she was a boss, and went out and did something.
Yeah, a little bit. I have a tendency to do that. I call myself the most lazy, productive person you'll ever meet because I
Sounds like
really
an
am.
engineer to me.
Yeah, I'm like I'm like if you give me the opportunity, I will lay in bed for like 3 days straight. But if I really wake up and decide something, then I'm just gonna do it, and nothing can stop me. And so that's what happened. Is a bit of it was a year ago ish at this point. Um, I was hearing about, don't let the stuff, just reach out to people or whatever. And I was watching TED Talks vigorously. And there were certain people for those talks. And I was like, you know what? These are people who are on the internet. I'm on the internet. So I could just talk to them. So I just connected with them like on LinkedIn and start messaging them. Or I was starting to know more engineers and I started reaching out, talking with them. So I was having these conversations with people. I just wasn't putting it out there too much. Um, and for me at least, I never really wanted to do streaming or YouTube or anything like that. I was like, I don't really do cameras and just sitting here editing and talking to people all day. But then I was like, there's different ways to go about it. And now doing this stream and like kind of doing like live electronics and sharing things like that, I was like, I could do this. This is fine. Um, Definitely wouldn't be like a full time YouTuber, but I'm more of like, yeah, this was something I was already thinking about of building this brand for myself or starting a business or just like having some sort of community. Um, yeah, and starting doing like here, there's like a tutorial for, not a whole tutorial, but I was already starting to get like a camera set up for like, let me show you how I clean my keyboard out piece by piece type thing. And then right after, we're starting the live stream and doing stuff like that. So it was something that I was kind of thinking about in the works. The only difference is if I did YouTube then or streaming, I wouldn't have shown my face because I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about the tech. So I wasn't. That's why the camera's aimed down at the shot, not at me. But as we've evolved, I was like, you gotta have a mix of both because you gotta connect with your audience, and I think it helps bring in like people from all over to be like, this isn't just some person from a specific background doing this. It's someone outside of the norm doing these type of things, and it really like opens the space up for them to do it as well.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to when you were showing earlier the projects you started doing, like the how to clean your keyboard, and I'm curious if you've ever stopped to think about um, in that moment, who did you decide that your audience was, and is that the same audience that you hope to reach now?
Um, no. Well,
Who should be watching the Aleia content machine? Like who is gonna learn or benefit from you? Who is it that you're trying to reach?
so originally when I started, it was just like just putting it out there on the internet. That was really it. It was just like, yeah, why not? Might as well. I know some stuff. I could share some stuff with people. Maybe they'll know some stuff and just call it a day. And then as it's evolved, like I said, you'll see more things where it's just like not me. Well, I guess there's stuff with me, but it's now at a point where yes, it's technically for everyone. Like I want everyone to like come on and see it and learn and interact and stuff. But it's a little more niche for me in the sense of like I'm trying to reach the outliers. So people like me who are like of color, um, or are women, or just people who don't fit the typical stereotype of like um, the white male dominating the tech industry because it is still like the dominant. And I think because of that, even at my job, like I stand out like a sore thumb. It's crazy because no one
In
there.
Atlanta, in one of the areas of the country where white people are typically in the minority, aren't they?
Well, yeah. Well, right now I'm in Arizona, so it's a little mixed. But even out there, tech companies, yeah, it's still a bit more. It's not as imbalanced, but it's still imbalanced. Here, it's like I mean, the place is huge, but I know in my like connected labs I work in, I'm probably the youngest person. I'm probably one of 5 or 6 women, probably one of 2 or 3 African Americans. And if you combine that all, then I'm probably the only African American woman in any of those. And most of my coworkers are like 40 and above, and most of them are uh, Caucasian males. So it's like I stick out like a sore thumb, and that's cool. I don't care. It's just I feel like there needs to be a bit more transparency about just because those spaces are dominated by those groups doesn't mean you can't be and you're not allowed in those groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people see enough of it because there's plenty of people I know who are just like me and want to do electronics and robots and tech, but they don't see other people doing it. And so they don't think it's possible. They don't think they're allowed to be in those spaces. And
Or I
so,
might not even think that that job exists if I've
yeah,
literally never met anyone that has that job.
right.
Um,
It's never
I'm also
see
curious by the what sounds like an age gap difference.
huge.
Is that
Yeah.
do you think there was just like a generation of people that didn't get the skills that Intel needed? Is that what's happening? Are you part of the new wave?
Um, I am definitely part of the new wave. I will say that. I've heard a few coworkers talk about it. Some of my older coworkers talk about it, and you feel a little back and forth about it because they'll talk about these young people coming in and changing everything or pushing them out, and it's like. you feel a little bad about it. At the same time, that's kind of how evolution works. Things have to iterate. Um, I don't know what the gap is. Maybe it's just maybe our generation doesn't work the same way, and I think that's what it is too. Is we work differently than the generations before us. We're more like entrepreneurs. We work from home. Um, we may just find like other places to go to, or maybe I just decided to push my way in the door quickly. But there's not as many people. I think some of the youngest people there are probably in their like early 30s. I'm in my mid 20s. Um, and really, when I started there, I was in my early 20s. So it's interesting. There's not too many. I think, and plus, with that type of job, working at Intel, it's a very high level company. They're very picky about who comes in. They usually want a lot of experience, a lot of hands on like job experience. So that does kind of push it to where you have to be a little older to get in because you need to have time to get that experience. I just took some very I worked instead of going in straight as an engineer, I went in as a technician. So that the requirement was a little lower. And then I was like, I'll just stay here and keep working hard, still go to school, get my degree. And that way I'm already in the door, but I can still work my way up. Rather than waiting until like I'm of a certain age and have the exact perfect requirements and then go in.
Solid tactic. Solid tactic. All right. Well, yeah, I don't want to keep you too much longer, and I know we got to have a little transition period, a little more maybe Ducky Cam before Tech Topical.
Yes.
Do you have any favorite moments today from Open House?
There's a lot of stuff today at Open House. Let's see. What was my favorite moment? I think just in general, it wasn't more so a moment. It was just like the event itself because, a lot of people there either are juniors who have never been to make school physically or their perspectives who also haven't been to make school physically. As someone who was there, it hit me a little differently because, like, Jordan, I lived in that building. And people remind me of that all the time. They're like, as soon as the building opened, you showed up. You didn't leave till it closed. We were there weekends. It's like I lived in the mixed school building. And I connected with it because I was the tour guide as an ambassador as well. Yep. And so, like, there'll be times when I'm just laying around and I was like, oh, I miss that kitchen, or I miss sitting and working in the basement, or just lounging on the sofas and stuff. And so when I went to the event and it was kind of that top-down view of the school layout, it was so close to being just like the actual school that the nostalgia hit me like a truck. Like I was like, oh.
I'm glad to hear that. I literally created that map from scratch from looking at the campus maps.
It was great because I was sitting there and I was like, even when we were waiting for the event to start, I went and just sat on the sofa or moved my little circle and facial tap to the sofa to like the exact place I normally sit, and I was just like,
did you take a screenshot?
I didn't. I should have.
Well,
I'm sure we'll do it again.
Don't worry, those backgrounds aren't going anywhere. We're gonna definitely have more events in those spaces. So yeah, if you have ideas for fun things to do in there, yeah, hopefully many more times where we can sit on a virtual couch together.
Yes, it was fun. So that was probably my favorite moment, rather than like the specific thing at the event. It was just more like that feeling like I was back at mid school a little bit more than just popping on a video call.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that it had that kind of effect. Definitely what I was going for. Yeah, maybe I'll have to make the basement layer next. All right, well, thank you so much, Aleia. I want to make sure I transition over and get ready with Brian for Tech Topical. Thank you all so much for hanging out. This is our first ever, like, we've been streaming for 5 hours straight.
We just keep going.
Thank you to Jackie for a lot of filler. Hope if you didn't catch it earlier, there were some really cute yawns and stretches going on.
I saw some Ducky Cam. Didn't catch the yawns and stretches, but I definitely got some Ducky Cam.
Yeah, if those of you who are still in chat, if you saw Ducky Cam earlier and you just want more Ducky Cam in your life, maybe with some lo-fi beats during the week for homework or whatever, let me know. Shoot me a DM or just drop a 1 in chat real quick. But yeah, that's probably what I'll do next. I'm gonna put on some T-Pain and point the camera at my dog again while we get ready with Brian.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. I hope to see y'all next week. We'll do some more fun stuff then. Be prepared. Using the goggles next week and gloves. If I can find some.
All right. Thanks, Aleia.
Bye. Thanks.